You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network. This is the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of Thunderquack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's Thunderquack time!
Hello and welcome back to the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of Thunderquack.com. You know what? It's 2022, and I've decided we don't need to do the whole thing. We don't need to do the whole thing every time. Patreon supporters get it early on Tuesdays. Everybody else gets it on Friday. Our Patreon producers are Brian Morowski and JJ Samuel. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen.
I'm your other host, Amanda Conkin.
It's, you know what happens is like it becomes so rote that it just like
you just put it. You can just copy and paste it and put it on the top of the podcast each time instead of us doing it.
Oh God, yeah, it's just, yeah, it loses any kind of magic, and it's like no one's listening to me when I do this part now. It's just the ba sort of thing, right? So it's a new year. This is our first podcast of the year 2022. And I think, you know, let's here's the thing. Podcasting is not a hard thing to do, but it can be difficult, if that makes sense. It is just us having a conversation, but it's the stuff around that can make it difficult. I don't want it to be difficult anymore. I don't want it to be like a thing where like, oh, I messed that up, I have to go back and do it again. So we're just gonna jettison the old intro, and I'm just gonna do whatever I feel like every other week. Because yeah, it's just like
I will say
it's not
that you say that it's difficult, but I feel like our format is one of the least difficult formats, and so the one part that we plan we can change because that's just the way that this podcast goes. But now you're making me think that for the rest of this podcast I have to now come up with a different ending so that I can also say that I'm going to do whatever I want in 2022 for how we sign up.
See, now that's where it becomes difficult, because coming up with a different sign off every week,
it's real hard.
Every 2 weeks. Look, I don't want to call you out, Amanda, but I don't think you've got it in you.
I think
I just don't.
That you are correct, because as much as you think that podcasting is difficult, I do too, and I do nothing but show up. Like I have to, I've gone on to other people's podcasts before, and there's like you have to do stuff like decide what you're going to talk about. And actually I did. I once really like messed up Ryan, where I was like, hey Ryan, come on the podcast, like fill in for Mike. And he's like, okay, great. What are we talking about? I was like, I don't know. He's like, what do you mean you don't know? And I'm like, I don't know. That's not how the podcast works. You just come and we talk about stuff.
Yeah, that's not what we do. That's not how we do things here.
Although we have had structure for this the last month of 2021. We did have structure, which is good, and was leading places.
And now this episode as well.
Which is good. Every now and then, I feel like once a year we have something that we actually do on the podcast that has
we could do a run.
We just do something that has structure, and then the rest of it is chaos. But I think you're right. I don't know. I think we keep the ending the same. We'll see. We'll see what moves me.
I would say just keep it the same way. But we have a good reason to have structure right now, right? Like we want to talk about the Matrix, so it's like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. But yeah, like starting on the next episode, it's like I don't know what we're talking about in the second half of January. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. It'll be good.
Yeah, but oh man, I'm just realizing a bunch of things. This really has nothing to do with anything. We were supposed to go away next weekend, and be away on the Monday. And I'm just realizing that would have been the case, and we're supposed to do our Hawkeye review next week, and it's like, oh, that would have been really messed up, but we're gonna cancel that because because the apocalypse woke up again and decided to reassert its dominance.
Oh dear.
No one in popular culture and media, even in scripture, the apocalypse is like a one and done thing. It's like it happens and then it's like, oh boy, wow, that was an apocalypse. But in reality, it feels like it's very drawn out and it's taking quite a while. And I guess that's all right. I don't know which one is preferable.
Isn't that a poetic thing? Not with a bang, but a whimper. I feel like that's the way the world ends. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I watched Don't Look Up.
Everything will be fine.
I feel like, and I know you didn't watch it, but for those people that did watch it,
yeah,
you get it. It was like a documentary, Mike. It was like watching a documentary about the end of the world. Like I read a
tweet. I read a tweet that was a synopsis of an article that was basically a climate scientist saying like, "Oh, this is not science fiction. This is not allegory. This is what I deal with."
Yeah.
On a regular basis, like on a daily basis. And then like all you have to do is look at the way that COVID is being handled by almost every government in the world, where it's like, well, we're going to get another wave with Omicron. And instead of them going, what do we need to do in order to save lives? The conversation is, how bad can it be without us shutting things down? Right? Like what things can we say that we did? This is really like a very BC opinion as well, because and I'm sure that there are other places that that are going to be able to relate to it. But the response this time around is very much, well, we can't do what we should do, which is what we did the first time around, which was very effective. But we have to do something because otherwise people will say that we did nothing. So how can we say that we're doing something without actually doing anything? And as a matter of fact, doing less than we've done for any of the previous surges. I think that the provincial government thinks that they pulled that off, but the numbers keep just skyrocketing on a daily basis. And their initial guidance was, just if you feel like maybe you have symptoms, then maybe stay home and isolate if that's cool with you, but like definitely wear a mask in most situations where you should wear a mask. And it's like, so keep doing what we've been doing. That's what you're saying. Like, but they worded it in a way where it was like, we're giving new recommendations, and the new recommendations are actually maybe like be even more chill about it than you were 6 weeks ago, even though it's going to be way worse than it's been.
It's different hurdles that we've got to deal with now. But exactly like what you're talking about, though, that like now the hurdles are, and I mean, I will say over the holidays, the thing that we were expecting another thing to come just before, like we got an announcement in BC on the 24th of December. And the announcement wasn't anything about what we were doing or measures. It was that our medical system was being overwhelmed with people coming in for tests. So they mandated that people stop getting tested and instead just stay home. But it's because they couldn't, like the staffing shortages and the things that people like, we just don't have systems in place and we just don't have infrastructure to deal with these things. And it's so how do you even function, or how do you cope? And I don't know where I was going with that, but it was just sort of an interesting thing to be like, people try to deal with things in the best way they can. And then sometimes that's going to be worse than the thing that they were previously doing, because what they had previously doing now doesn't work, and it's evolved and it's all different and nothing matters and the world's going to end. Or it's going to get better and we're going to come out of this totally fine. Totally fine. All is okay.
We come out. We're gonna come out of this, and then everybody's gonna be like, "Hey, remember climate change?
Hit something else.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think the world's ever getting better.
But,
man, why do we always start podcasts on such a bummer note? I mean, we're about to talk about science fiction in which they can completely bring back a world and get a second chance. So perhaps that's what we can do as well.
Yeah.
But I will say
I
that the
it
weather this
I
year has been
yeah.
unprecedented, and I don't think it's ever getting better. I don't know. I just spent
The
14 days in
you've
sub 20
yeah.
temperatures, and it's just, ugh.
And you missed it down
I
here,
know.
and you are another person who can confirm, because you spent more time in the Okanagan, but you've spent almost as much time since you left school, like
Yeah.
high school,
Yeah.
down here as I have.
Mhm.
And so you have like the sort of similar experience. The snow that we got, like the two huge snow dumps that we got, they were not Vancouver snow.
No.
It was Okanagan
Yeah.
snow in
Yeah.
Vancouver, which is so weird. Like it was, because in the Okanagan it's like that dry powder
Yeah.
snow
Yeah.
where like
Actual
a,
snow.
a wind gust comes along and you get like the little swirls on the
Yeah.
street and
Yeah.
stuff of the snow, just kind of like it's actually like in the Okanagan I loved it. It was
'Cause you're
fantastic.
prepared
But in
for
the
it and there's
Okanagan
clouds.
people were prepared to
Yeah.
deal with it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And people had studded, tires and stuff like that to deal with the snow and be able to drive, down the street and go get groceries and whatnot. But people here, it's like, man, people in their little sedans with their all seasons trying to go up a 35-degree incline, and then like just making it about 6 feet and then just woo, and just like spinning,
Yeah.
like
No.
just almost going sideways back down the hill because they have no idea what they're doing. It's
And it's
very
just not
frustrating. I live
we're just
on
not ready
a
for it.
hill that's like a 35
I mean,
degree
there's
incline,
huge and I
right?
mean, yeah, you've got a
Um,
crazy hill. There's hills all over the place. The buses can't function.
yeah,
I don't know. It's a whole thing when cities can't, and I
yeah,
mean, it's the same.
yeah.
Didn't this happen to
The
Texas
city
last
shuts
year,
down.
right? Where there are some cities that are just not built
Yeah,
for certain types of weather. And it has a
yeah.
consequence. Like we build cities based on the weather. Because something I thought of that I would like the cities of the future to just have like roads that thaw when snow falls on them. What a brilliant
I
idea.
this I have talked about this, I think even on this podcast, the solar roadway
Yeah.
thing, which like was a thing for a minute and then everybody just kind of stopped talking about. And I still think it's like, this is the thing that we could do that would change the
Yeah, but
world.
it would
And
change
it's
the
like,
world, and
this is,
then people would stop making money off of the catastrophe of the world, so there you go.
of course, it's one of these several like accessible, logical solutions that would do multiple things, right? It's one of these renewables that's like, hey, you guys realize that if we did this, it would actually, yes, everybody goes, oh, but what about the cost of replacing all of the roadways? And it's like, well, we wouldn't do all of the roadways. You would do main thoroughfares and stuff like that. But like the economic boost that it would give if Canada was like, hey, Vancouver, we're gonna give you the resources uh to put these in on all of your main thoroughfares in Vancouver. It's like the number of people that would be employed and would and then that money goes back into the economy, and then there's taxes. Those taxes go back into paying for that work to be done. Like it creates a cycle, and that's how economies work, and that's why like there are boom years and stuff, because that investment goes in, and it would be a win for everybody except, like you say, for the corporations that make a lot of money off of it being the crappy way that it is right now, right?
And okay, I mean,
But solar roadways, for people that don't know, are basically like these concrete hex squares, hex tiles that have solar panels in them. They're like glass, they're not even glass. I can't remember what it is, but it's something on the top of it that's like a transparent thing, and like there's and the solar panels are embedded in it, and they basically interlock to create circuits, and you basically replace all of your pavement with these tiles, and they generate electricity, and they could generate enough electricity in the right circumstances to basically power your whole city. And like if you had enough of them, and like if you had a big enough property and you just did like your driveway, you could power your house for part of the year. The problem with solar and all of that stuff, always becomes batteries, and we don't have a way to store it yet, but we're getting better at that because of electric cars. So it's like, it is close. Like, that future is so close and it's so attainable, and if people would just invest in it, it would be a very good
Apparently
future.
it's been tried in
Because
France.
like you're saying, those solar roadways, because they have electric circuits in them, they don't collect ice. Like, in a cold enough temperature, obviously they would, but in a cold enough temperature they wouldn't be feasible anyways, because you'd get so much heat loss that you would lose the electricity, and it wouldn't be worth it. But like in Vancouver, with our typical weather, it would totally be worth it most of the time, because we get enough sunlight. It's a bit of a misnomer in this city. It's like, oh, but it's always cloudy. It's like, yeah, but we get enough sunlight that you could definitely generate that electricity on a regular basis, and yeah, it would keep the. But then I don't know. Do we then start seeing an issue of like the ground is heated now
Well,
or
I mean,
something
yeah,
like that, and that's creating
you never
another
know.
issue?
You never know what could
Who knows?
actually
But
happen. But and then also, it's like, well, temperatures are what they are for the next 10 years. But what's going to happen after that, right? Or at least we hope that they'll
yeah,
hold steady. And I will say the having had a brief stint in politics, the reason I feel like people sometimes these things don't work is because uh people don't know what's best for them. Like
hmm
genuinely, because everybody has their own opinions about what is the most important thing to them. Then I think that that's why it flies, is that it's a combination of individual people. The amount of people that are complaining about the bike lanes that got put in Penticton this last year is astronomical. Even my parents, who are like pretty level-headed because I've forced it down their throat for the past decade, and they're pretty good, they still complain about the bikeways, and I'm kind of like, you guys, $5 million for bikeways? Like, that's how much bikeways cost. Like, it's not, and they're like, oh, and then they get plowed first and blah blah blah. And I'm like, what? It's a separate issue from whatever other issue you're worried about. But people can't understand, right? Because it's like money is finite, right? And they're like, well, we can only have these things if we can only have these things. And it's like, well, no, we could have a lot of other things if we just convinced ourselves that we wanted something that was better for the world. But I don't know, not to get too pessimistic, but I will say it's not only corporate people convincing us things that are against our best interest because it's cheaper, easier, faster, and instant gratification and all that jazz. But then it riles us up and is like, and people are like, yes, why do we need bikes? I don't have a bike, so I don't need to pay for bike lanes, and they're a waste of space. Blah blah blah. Anyways, that's my impersonation of a typical Pentictonite. I don't know what they sound like, but anyways, that if anybody's wondering, is that's where I was. I've been there for so many days this year or last year, Mike. I was there for so many days. Anyways, that's a whole thing. But I did. I missed
what would you? It it sounds like you're saying too many days.
too many
I
days. Too many days. There's only so many days you can spend in a small town, I feel like. Unless you live there, in which case you like
uh
you learn to love it, but
yeah.
so
I do think that solar punk is the best of all possible
ah,
futures,
solar punk.
and
Yes.
and I would love to see, yeah, some more solar punk ideology coming out of people. It's one of those things where I think like a big company has to go first, like a Google campus or an Apple
Hey,
campus or
Elon
something
Musk,
like
how
that
about
has to
instead
be
of
like,
going to
oh, we're gonna
Mars,
put
you
in.
make the world hospitable
Yeah.
for people? That's
I don't anticipate Elon Musk doing anything actually beneficial for
well,
humanity
I
ever, because he is one of those assholes that benefits from us being in the sad state
yeah.
that we're in. Don't buy Tesla products, guys.
It
Don't do
sucks because I
it.
really want a Tesla. Why?
There are other
I know.
electric vehicles that are actually way more reliable. Go
Yeah.
get a Nissan Leaf, or get like a Prius Prime, or a Rav4 Prime hybrid. Like they're much more. So here's the thing with it. Yes, the Tesla has some of the best mileage for the battery, blah blah blah, all that stuff. They're very good in that regard. The cars themselves are very poorly manufactured and have all sorts of defects and problems. Like, I've heard so many horror stories from people. It's the opposite of what you want in a vehicle. They are not reliable vehicles, and then it's like there's none of like the luxury features in the base model Teslas that people are buying, the ones that you see everywhere that are just so ugly. God, they're just such eyesores.
I
They just look
disagree.
like
I
jelly
don't know.
beans
I
with
love
wheels.
Teslas.
Like they're just
I really hope that we get a cease and desist
I mean, like, hey,
for talking.
they're well designed in the same way that a cardboard box is well designed, because it does exactly what it needs to do, and there's no flash or anything to it. Yeah, they got a really big touch screen inside. Whatever, it's not a big deal. They're very, very poorly, like, visually, like they're so boring. They This is what I say to Crystal, because I had this conversation with her so many times. She's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, a Tesla is what if you asked a toddler to draw a car, that's what a Tesla looks like. It's just like it's the most boring, predictable shape for a car that you could imagine. It's just like there's nothing visually interesting about it. There's nothing in like there's no ingenuity behind it. It is 100% branding, and they're not good. They're not reliable cars, and that means that they're actually not good for the environment, because cars that break down more frequently have higher carbon footprints than cars that don't. Like a reliable piece of machinery has a lower carbon footprint by virtue of the fact that you're not replacing pieces on it. You're not like like it just they're not as good for the environment as everybody wants to believe that they are. It's not the best path. It's just that they have stellar, incredible branding. The marketer in me is like, yes, they've done a very, very good job. But yeah, Elon Musk is definitely a snake oil salesman, and he doesn't deserve to have any of the notoriety that he's got. He's just you know who he is? Like, Elon Musk is John Hammond from Jurassic Park. And when Ian Malcolm is like, you saw what others had done and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourself, so you don't you don't have to deal with any of the consequences, right? Like you just went like, let's just do the thing. And he hired the right people. He is not a very smart man. Like I think I've talked about this on the
I can't say that
podcast
I
before,
know
and you
enough
always get
about
worried that
Elon.
like Elon Musk is he's gonna come shut us down.
Yeah. I feel like you talk a lot of smack about Elon Musk.
When they started doing all the SpaceX stuff and he started like going out in front of everybody and talking, it's like they would have these press conferences and people would ask him questions. There would be a panel up on the stage of like 4 or 5 people, and it's like Elon
But he's
Musk
not
and then a bunch
supposed
of
to be smart.
scientists. And
But he's yeah. But why is
well,
he
and
included
they
as
would
a possible
ask him the
scientist?
questions, and he would answer the questions, and it was like, you don't know, you very clearly don't know what you're talking about. And it's one of those things that's like, work in tech, like get a job in tech and you'll understand. There are 2 types of people in tech: people who know what they're talking about, who generally give very succinct and usually curt responses of like, it's like, hey, we're thinking that we want to do blah 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 blah, and a technically knowledgeable person, a skilled person, will go, no, we can't do that because the technology doesn't allow us to do that for this reason, right? And then the business will often come back and go, well, that doesn't matter, we've already made a decision about what this product is, so now you need to figure out how to make it work. And that's Elon Musk's role, is to be that guy of saying like, and to be fair, a balance of those two like those two perspectives, those two ideologies, is where you get innovation. So it can be good. But Elon Musk is so high on his own supply that he gets out there and he talks, and people who don't know what they're talking about that work in tech and science, they will talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and usually it'll be this circular logic stuff where like there is no beginning, middle, or end to it. They're just speaking in a way that like it's almost dizzying when they talk. And so you ask them a simple question about how that rocket booster works, and they talk for 20 minutes to give you an answer, and the answer has nothing to do with the physics of how the rocket booster works or the engineering or any of the science behind it, but is in fact just I had an idea and then I talked to my team, and my team did such a great job, and they're so great. Look at all of these talented scientists up here with me. They're very talented. They're all very smart. And so when I said this is what we got to do, these guys, they put together the work and they did it, and they're the best. And here's why it's the best. And this is why it's a really good idea, which is because it's my idea. So let me tell you about this time that I was sitting on the toilet and then I came up with this idea, right? And that's the way that they'll talk. And then they'll use a couple of metaphors of like, so when you're building a rocket, it's like building a house. And when you build a house, you want to do the framing before you do the foundation. That's a really important part of people who don't know what they're talking about in tech, talking using metaphors, is that they'll go to construction metaphors having no understanding of construction either, and they'll say things that are completely wrong. That all you have to do is watch a couple episodes of Homes on Homes and you'll know that they don't
I
know what they're talking about.
I can't. You have to watch Don't Look
And
Up.
Elon Musk is one of those
Watch
guys.
Don't Look Up. I don't know.
I don't need
know
to,
you
Amanda.
don't.
I
I
don't
know you
need
don't,
to
but it's
watch
like,
it.
I don't know. This whole conversation that we've just had it's actually pretty topical too, because we're talking about it on the Matrix podcast. Because like the whole thing in the Matrix
Yeah.
is that we destroyed ourselves with innovation, and I just think that that's like
Yeah.
so apt. And then I don't know, and then even the creations didn't. I don't know. It's just such a weird. The world is.
Let's not get into the Matrix
Hurts my
until
head.
we're getting
That's
into the Matrix,
fine.
because we're gonna want to spoil
Oh
stuff,
yeah,
right?
God. But it just hurts.
I'm gonna say this about Don't Look Up. Here's what I'm gonna say
Okay.
about Don't Look Up. I don't like Jennifer Lawrence
Oh,
anymore.
okay.
I don't know when it happened, and I don't know why, but at a certain point in time, her angry woman persona that she puts on every character that she does, it's exhausting to
Yeah.
me. It's exhausting. I don't, it's such a, like, it worked for a couple of her roles, right? Like Silver Linings Playbook, it was exactly what that role needed. The balance of it when she played Katniss of like, yeah, like that, it's got to come out every once in a while, right? And I'm thinking of like the scene in the first one when she shoots the arrow
Oh yeah, and then
at
kisses.
the
Yeah,
gallery,
yeah.
right? And then she does the
Yeah.
bow, and it's like, yeah, that's why you cast her, because she has that part of Katniss down perfectly. Which I think is why the third and fourth movie didn't work for me, because she was not very good at that other side. Like, because in the book she's supposed to be like defeated and broken, and in the movie she just comes off as sad angry. Like it's a different thing. It didn't work for me.
I mean, that's fair.
But yeah, like I see her in the previews, and it's like Leonardo DiCaprio I can get behind. I all of the oh man, who is it that plays the
Meryl
president?
Streep.
Meryl Streep. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that looks like a great comedic performance, right? Like there's a lot of it that I look at and I go like, this looks really good. And then she has like one of her outburst moments that you could like literally pull out of any of the other movies that she's done and put into this. And it's just like, I just don't want to, I don't, on top of everything else that we've talked about, we talked about it on, I think the last Nuff Said podcast. Cause I think that you said, was that actually
It
on
wasn't
the
on
air,
the
or
air.
was
I
that
just
after the
told
fact? I
you
don't remember.
off the air because I
Okay.
tried to generate ideas for what we would
Yeah.
talk about on the Thunder Quack podcast.
Yeah. I can't, I just like, it's because of the fact that it's so real. It's like, I just don't need it. I just don't need it right now. I need Matrix Resurrections. I need stuff like that. Like I need hopeful stories about what's good about humanity. I know that people are stupid, dumb animals and very panicky and make bad decisions that are against their own self-interest because they've been convinced by white people with money primarily, that they should do that, right? I know that stuff. We've just lived through the 4-year Trump administration, and I don't need a movie to like. Am I using the word sardonic right? Is it do they sardonically poke fun at it? I don't know. But
Satirize.
what's a
They
sard?
satirize it, right? It's like satire.
Yeah.
But I guess
Now I need to know
maybe
what
I'm like, yeah, is
sardonic
sardonic
means.
I don't know.
Satire is correct. Yeah, sardonic. See, I am
Grimly
so
mocking or
good
cynical.
at the
Yeah.
speaking things.
Yeah.
Grimly mocking or cynical, which is exactly the tone of what that movie
Yeah.
is, right?
That's
And
fair.
like I
That's
just like I don't need it. I don't need it. I want to. You know what I need? I need a movie. Like I need like a solar punk movie that's like, hey, what if and you know what? Actually, when we get to when we sort of finish our conversation about the Matrix, I'll talk about what I'd like to see next from that franchise. And solar punk is actually like the direction that I want that to go because
I've never heard about
I
this
think that
until
that's
this
the most
podcast, and
interesting
I'm
thing.
very excited. I'm very excited
Until
about
I
the
started
concept of
saying it,
solar punk.
yeah,
Yeah, I've never heard of solar punk before, but I like it.
I yeah. Think of it in the way that we say steampunk, which is something that I think everybody
But yes,
understands when you say
yeah,
steampunk,
yeah.
or you say
The cyber,
cyberpunk, right?
yeah,
Solar punk is an ideology of like using science in concert with nature to harness like the energy of nature, basically like the sun, wind, like
I
ocean
love
power,
it.
right? Like ocean
So
turbines
great.
and stuff like that. use
Yeah,
use that stuff in because honestly, like 400 years ago, that was our technology, right? We had windmills where we were harnessing wind to do
yeah,
our work for
yeah.
us. We would use I is it just a water wheel, water mill? What, I don't know. What am I thinking of?
Yeah.
Is there not
Water,
another
a
word for
water
that?
mill. Y-
Yeah, like we would use that
Mill isn't that just a
to
mill?
like from yeah,
A water wheel.
I
Yeah.
guess. I don't it's oh
I
yeah.
actually thought about this the other day when I was
Uh
watching Beauty and the Beast, the new one, and I was like, "Oh, they had windmills." Oh yeah, windmills
yeah.
are not a new invention.
No, not like yeah. So we used to use this stuff to to support our lives. And then at a certain point we discovered things like combustion as an energy source, and then electricity became the thing that everybody needed, and we started just killing the world with it. So that oil and that plastic and the all that stuff. So like solar punk is the idea of getting away from that stuff and using biodegradable
Like
stuff
it.
in place of things like plastics, which like we there are parts of the world where like this is happening and this is becoming the future. It's just not enough of the world, and it's not, it's too little too late at this point. But um I do think that like after the collapse, that's what we're in for. Like when that happens eventually, which I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetime. I think it's probably a, 2 or 3 generations away. But when it does happen, when the things that we've done to the environment become so unsustainable that we have to completely abandon, certain cities, and like the one that we're in right now, and I figure out new ways of getting on with life. That's the avenue, because I don't think technology is not going to disappear. That knowledge isn't going to disappear. We'll find ways to preserve it, and it'll adapt, and we're human beings. That's what we're good at. We'll keep destroying the earth for a very, very long time. Don't worry about that. We'll just find new better ways to do it.
New ways to do
um
it.
but yeah, it's a yeah, I don't know. Let's get into the Matrix. Let's get into the Matrix. Before we go into spoilers, let's just give our overall thoughts when we talk about this fourth installment, and having just watched the other three,
Controversial. I have a
or in your
controversial
case
comment
having watched the last two. Okay, go ahead.
before we start anything, because what you just said about like technology's not going away. I do just want to say that the Matrix is what happens in the alternate reality to what happens in Dune. Because I feel like computers got too far advanced in Dune, and they're like, no more computers. And I feel like
Yeah,
they're two like sides of us. Sorry, that's it. We don't have to actually talk about Dune, but
it's
they got
no,
twisted.
it's that's perfect,
That's
because
what I'm
yeah,
saying.
Dune is what happens when the humans win, and the Matrix is what happens when the computers
There you
win,
go. Yeah, I think that that's an
right?
accurate.
Like
Yeah,
it's yeah,
where they were like, no more
that's
AI.
perfectly, that's exactly what it
There you
is.
go.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anyway.
when the AI gets too powerful and the humans go, "Oh, we shut this down,
Yeah.
and we're never going back to
Yep.
it."
Very cool.
Yeah, as opposed to the Matrix, which is where the computers are like, you know what? We're just gonna
We
we're
don't
just
need
gonna
you.
take your
Yeah.
keys.
Yep.
You guys shouldn't drive anymore. Um,
Fair.
yeah,
And I mean
I
that's
cool.
what
Okay,
happens in
so
Dune too. Is like they probably shouldn't. The machine should have won.
yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Carry on. Ah,
No, go. So, what were your general thoughts? I mean, anybody who follows me on Twitter knows that I am in love with this movie, and that this whole experience of rewatching the Matrix movies, with the knowledge and experience that I have now, has made them so much more enjoyable for me. So this one was like, I don't know, transcendent is the best word for it. It's so
awesome.
good. But for you, how was it for you? Because we haven't actually
We
talked about
haven't.
this. You just said yesterday I saw
I
it,
did
and we haven't
because
talked
I
about
had
it.
originally been like, do I have to see it? Like 4 days ago, I was like, do I have to watch this? And you're like, you know what? You don't have to do anything. But you said it in that tone that I was like, I do. I have to watch The Matrix to talk about it. Anyways,
Yeah.
so but that's the thing is that I wouldn't have rewatched these movies if we weren't podcasting about them, and then I probably wouldn't have gone to see The Matrix Resurrections, which would have been sad because it is fun. It's such a fun movie because here's the thing: I loved The Matrix when I was in high school. Like that movie was just so great, and it was. I mean, I like a huge sci-fi nerd, and it just was really fun. And The Matrix Resurrections hit all of the cool parts of what I loved about The Matrix. I am appreciative that we rewatched the other two. And I'm appreciative that I waited a little bit before watching it because you had gone on opening night, I think, and then Curtis had gone a while, like maybe a couple days after that or something, and then you guys had a.
No, Curtis and
Did
I
you go
went
together?
together.
Oh, okay. But then there was either
Yeah.
you were talking about it or you had a Twitter exchange. Reality versus the internet is a blurry space in my brain. But Curtis hated it. And he said that part of what led to his unenjoyment of the film is that he wasn't as familiar with 2 and 3. So I watched.
I think that's unfair. I think you just put words in Curtis's mouth. What Curtis said is if you haven't seen the sequels, the
Yeah.
other two sequels, you will be completely lost and you will not enjoy this
Well,
movie. I didn't have a good
there you
time.
go.
He didn't say that he hated
Well,
it.
that's
He was just very confused by
confused and
it.
not enjoying it.
It
Okay. Yes, I was being hyperbolic.
yeah. Yeah.
But one of the things is that I was in um the Okanagan, and so I took my sister, and I was like, I'll get my sister to come to this movie with me because I got free points, and she'll come see a free movie. But she hasn't seen the second and the third one. So the whole time I was like, it's gonna be confusing. You're not gonna understand what's going on. Here's a synopsis of some stuff. Like basically, she asked me as the previews started coming on. She's like, wait, so what happened in the second and third one? And I was like, oh, okay. But because she appreciated the first one, and I had told her enough of the second and third one, like I mentioned who the Merovingian was, I said that. I mean, spoilers for the Matrix 2, 3, right? Which I assume everybody's aware of us. We're getting into these, but that like I had mentioned to her that they die in the end, and like what happened to the machines and all that stuff. And so she had enough information, and she knew enough from the original movie to like it, like because the opening scene is such an homage to the first film, right? And for me, like she was the one that she's like, oh yeah, they're doing the first one again, and I'm like, yeah. So it was kind of cool, and she like reacted to all the places. So it's, I don't know. I feel like sometimes going to a movie, it's the reason that you watch movies in cinemas is because it's a communal experience, right? And so I think that part of what makes movie watching interesting is the reactions of the people that you watch it with. And so it was kind of really interesting to watch it with my sister and see what she reacted to. And the things she reacted to were all the cinematic parts of the movie. They weren't like the lore parts of the movie or the things that were like, right? It was just about how the structure of this movie, about this sort of like epic romance, how it played out. And so I was able to watch it through the lens of somebody who hadn't seen the first three, really. Like I feel like you do need to watch the first Matrix to watch this one. For sure, because it doesn't mean anything really, like all of the weight of those characters, but you don't necessarily have to watch the second and the third one. Like knowing enough of it, they don't give you enough. So with that in mind, I think because you had said specifically, I think you gave me a shout out, and along with a bunch of other Raylos, for like thanking us for getting you to understand like epic romance as a thing that's worth consuming. And that is, so going into The Matrix Resurrections, knowing that it was an epic romance love story really helped shape
Yeah.
how I enjoyed that film. Because we had
Yeah.
watched, I quite enjoyed the second Matrix movie when we watched it. I thought the third one, I don't need to ever rewatch the third one again. It was so it was so forgettable. Like I had forgotten everything about that movie.
It's so funny because the third one I think is the one other than Resurrections. I think the third one is the one that I enjoyed.
Interesting.
Like when we were doing a rewatch, that's the one that I enjoyed the
Oh, okay.
most. Because it was like, oh my god, I can't believe how wrong I had this movie.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, like it was just that it was because it was not to rehash what we talked about on the last episode, but it was just such a like the scales falling from my eyes sort of
Right.
moment of like, oh my god, there is so much going on here that I just was not ready
Right.
for in 2003, right? Like it just like my mind just wasn't there, right? Yeah, it's yeah. So and then going into Resurrections, it was just like everything that you said, like knowing that like, oh, this is ultimately like the whole thing is about love. That's what wins, that's what conquers, that's the thing that some of these machines cannot figure out. But we'll get into it, when we get into spoiler territory. Was there anything else you wanted to say before we
I
get
think
into spoilers?
those are my like initial first thoughts, and then I feel like I'll have much more to say
Yeah.
as we go into
Okay,
into the film for sure.
cool. So if you haven't seen Matrix Resurrections, I highly recommend it. I think if you enjoyed the original, then it's worthwhile, but definitely do go in with a good knowledge of what happened in the second and the third movie. You don't necessarily have to go rewatch them again if you've already seen them. I also think that that's a good idea. If you haven't, like if you've been following along with us and you haven't been rewatching the movies, I do think that it's worthwhile. I think take everything that I've said over the last month and try and put that lens on it and enjoy it from that perspective, and I think that you'll get more out of it than if you try and make them all kung fu movies, which like it's so funny that they are not.
They are not at all. Yeah. Nope.
They're not, to the point that there's a very pointed joke about it in this movie. But yeah, I go watch that, and then watch Resurrections. And just like, I think that knowing what you're in for is such an important part of it. Like if you showed up for dinner somewhere and you didn't know that it was going to be Thai food, you might be upset that it was Thai.
Yeah, I mean that's fair.
Right? Because it's like, oh, this is the last thing that I was expecting. Even though like under the right circumstances, Thai food is exactly what you want, right? So just like, just know what it is going into it. Know that it is, everything is in service of that love story. And as long as you can be okay with that, and as long as you can make those things work for you in service of that story, I think that you'll enjoy it. So with that, I want to get into spoilers. I want to get into spoilers right away because I want to continue my thought from a second ago. So we're going to spoil it now. You've been warned. I was talking about like love is the answer, right? Like love is the solution, and it's the thing that like the architect can't understand it. Like he says that in the second movie. He basically I talks about the fact that like he thinks in these very like cause and effect, ones and zeros sort of mathematical precision, and that's why the Oracle exists, because the Oracle is there to comprehend essentially the human condition, and it's an algorithm that can predict human behavior, and that's why it's able to quote unquote see the future, right? Because it's aware of all of the angles. So if it's aware of all of the angles, then it can give a pretty good idea of, like one of the things I love about the Oracle is that she never actually says what's going to happen, right? And she always like lets the person who's speaking to her, and even some of these scenes we don't even actually get, we hear about them secondhand, from the characters of like, well, what did the Oracle say to you? And it's like, this, right? And a lot of the time it's like, well, exactly what I needed to hear, right? And that's exactly like that's the Oracle's job. And then when we meet Sati in the third movie and her father is explaining love to Neo, and he's like, I didn't understand, I didn't think that machines are capable of that emotion. And he's like, but love's a word, right? It's a word that we use to describe a connection. And so you start to get this idea of like, oh, there are machines that love, there are machines that do understand. And so when you get to Resurrections and the whole setup of the movie, the first act of this, I love it because this movie is broken into 3 perfect acts. In the post show, you'll hear me say that 3-act structure is dumb and everybody should, but 3-act structure, when it works well, is there's a reason why it's the standard. And I don't like it because it's become a crutch for a lot of storytellers. But if you know what you're doing and you know why you're using a 3-act structure as opposed to using a 5-act or a 7-act or something else, then like yes, use a 3-act structure. And Lana Wachowski nails it with this one because she breaks it into 3 episodes within the movie, right? You have everything before Neo, before Thomas Anderson goes back in. Thomas, right?
Yeah,
Is it Tom?
they call him Tom, and I love that so much.
Before he accepts that he is in the simulation, that he's in the Matrix, and all of that stuff of us like establishing this world, his status quo, his new status quo, and all of the players putting all the pieces on the board. So we got that act, and then we go into the second act, and the second act is the reawakening, which he has to have a second awakening because he's been reborn. But when he was reborn as Thomas Anderson, not as Neo. So he has to have a second awakening as Neo. And when he does, we are introduced to at first 2 characters. I don't remember both of their names. I know that the one is Sabebe, and I don't remember the other one. But
shoot, I can't remember
the machines.
So Baby's the best.
And I don't, it's obvious right now, I don't have the words to express the way that it made me feel in the movie theater being introduced to those characters. It was the fulfillment of the promise of those other 3 movies.
Octocles.
And it was just like, sorry,
Octocles.
did you get the name? Is that what you said?
Yeah, sorry.
Octocles, yes, thank you. No, it's awesome. And then there's the third one, which is like the little twig like, guy that hangs out with, and
gives a high five or fist bump or whatever. But yeah.
With the operator, they work together as operator. And I like these 3 characters that are in it, and also the one that Sati is working with, the like owl manta ray thing, which I can't remember the name of because they all have such like crazy names. It's so good. And I've only had the opportunity to see the movie once because in Canada we don't have access to it on streaming.
So sad.
The second that we do, I'm gonna watch it like 3 or 4 times. I halfway through the movie, I was like, this is gonna be so much better on the second watch because I'm not gonna be reacting to it. I'm gonna be anticipating things and I can like digest it and whatever. But when we get introduced to Sabebe and Octocles, it was just like, it was. This is gonna sound hyperbolic and ridiculous and very I don't know, like romantic in a way, but it literally felt like Lana Wachowski like reaching across time and space to someone who has connected with her work and saying like basically like putting a hand on me and being like, yes, you get it, you were right. like it was so amazing. And that's where I say like watching this movie, because like when we get to the third act, which is just all the action sequence, which is like the payoff for being there for the first and second act, when you get to the point, like from the point that Trinity awakens, that she reawakens, and again, it felt so good because when that last trailer came out, I was like, oh snap, Trinity is the one. I was half right. I wasn't entirely right, but I was onto it, right? Like I could see it already. They're both the one, because what if, yeah, oh my
Because
god.
they
Yeah.
couldn't exist. They needed the two pairs, and they needed the conflict, and because human beings need conflict and love, and
Yeah. What if Neo was never what is it, an anagram? I can't remember. What is it when the letters are jumbled or whatever? But for the one, right? Because that's what everybody thought
right.
back in the day, was like, oh, his screen name is Neo, but he's actually the one, right? Which you just switch the letters around. And it's like, what if that's not the case, but actually, like, he is Neo in the sense of like what Neo means, which is new, right? But anyways, and then Trinity, it's like, oh my god, it's so good, because we get to that second act, we go to the new Zion. I can't remember what it's called.
Iode?
It's been 2
Iode.
weeks since I've seen
Oh
the
yeah,
movie, right?
I just saw it yesterday. It's called Iode, I think.
Yeah. And and that the new, because it's like the reborn Zion, right?
It's so great.
And because the machines are working with them, they've created a utopia, and they have this, like, the false sky, and they've got crops,
And my favorite
and they've
character,
genetically re-engineered strawberry. Who's your favorite character?
Niobe's back. I don't know. I think,
yeah.
I mean, she's not necessarily my favorite, but I feel like her makeup undid everything that I hated about Jupiter Ascending's makeup. And so I feel like like the Wachowskis got their
It's so
groove
good.
back. And I know that it's not both of them, but I feel like both of them were responsible for Jupiter Ascending. So anyways.
Yeah.
But it just, because it like blew my brain. I was like waiting for the credits, and I was like, oh my gosh, it actually is her. I think, right? It actually is her, right? Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it is. And I think the thing that sells that makeup so well is her performance. Like,
So
she
good.
just, like, Jada Pinkett Smith just gives such a good performance as that, like, much wearier version of Niobe, that you're like, that you believe it, and that man, oh my god, it's such a good movie, Amanda. It's so good. But I understand why people don't like it. Like, I like, Curtis is not wrong to have the reaction that he had to it. Where Curtis screwed up, and where I called him out, is like, after the movie finished, he was like, that was very confusing. And I was like, well, I told you to watch the other two movies. And he's like, yeah, I was gonna, but I didn't get around to it. And I was like, yeah, but I told you that you had to watch those movies. So this is on you. This isn't on Lana Wachowski or anybody that was a part of making this film. This is on you. Don't buy the ticket if you don't want to go on the ride. You know what I mean? Like,
you have to be in for it. You have to know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you are, it's perfect. Right? And is it campy? Is it cheesy? Is the stuff with the Merovingian way over the top? Of course it is.
Yes.
But the fact that, like I alluded to before, like, they call it out in that scene, and the way that Neo tries to just move through that fight scene of, like, I'm just not engaging.
Yeah.
This, like the Merovingian is here to impede us, which, like, and it, like, to borrow from Tron, which is borrowing from many other philosophies, but like, the only way to win is not to play, right? And Neo gets that and understands. He's like, I'm just not going to engage, but because Smith is there, he has to, right? Like, that becomes a whole other thing. And then, like, come on, Jonathan Groff as Agent Smith.
It's so good.
He's so good. The way that he like, it's a completely different character, but it's a completely different character with all of the experiential knowledge of the Hugo Weaving Agent Smith. But he's reborn in a different way, because he has to be antithetical at all times to Neo. So Neo is reborn, like Neo is re-experiencing his awakening into the Matrix and becoming the one, right? That's the movie. Like he's going step by step through this stuff again. Only this time he's doing it without Trinity. Jessica Henwick's character, Bugs. I can't believe I forgot that. Bugs is a proxy for Trinity, but isn't Trinity. And as a matter of fact, they kind of talk about it a little bit. It's like she's actually kind of both of them.
Right. Yeah.
She's kind of Neo and Trinity together, right? Yeah. Hey, guess what? Do you guys know what that means? From like a spiritual and also like metaphorical. She's their kid. Like it's
yeah.
So good. There are so many levels to this story that it's just like I'm going to be watching this movie for years and re-experiencing things and like getting new stuff out of it. It's so good. But like to go back to Smith and to go back to Jonathan Groff, like he plays the character so pitch perfect because he has these moments where he slips into the Hugo Weaving impersonation, but he almost does it like he uses it as a weapon, like it's surgical, it's a scalpel. He brings it out when he knows it's going to get a reaction out of Neo.
Yeah.
Right? So it crops up every now and then, but then he goes back into this new version of the character who is a completely reborn, completely different character. He's a reincarnation as opposed to a continuation, right? And so he's got this different attitude and this different sort of, I love it when he's sort of like realizing who he is, and he looks at it and he's like and I was recreated, I was reborn, but as this newer, better version. And like the way that he like even makes fun of himself, and he's like, the piercing blue eyes are maybe a little bit much. He's kind of like making fun of the fact that it's Jonathan Groff, this like very pretty man boy. But there's this thing of like where he's self-deprecating, but then in the next moment he's also like but it's so good, like I love it, I love me, and that's not something that I could say before. Right? Which, let's put that into perspective. The movies that they were making before, that the Wachowskis were making before, they were making while they were still in the closet, coming to terms with like realizing, self-actualizing, all of that stuff, right? They're going through that process. This movie is the Matrix movie that gets made after Lana Wachowski has gone through that. She's on the other side of that. And so you've got Smith in this thing of him being like, I'm in this new body and it's different and it's flashy and it's a little bit out there, but you know what? It's me and I love it.
Yeah.
And there's just like, there's all this stuff in there that I could gush about this movie for hours. I enjoyed it so much. I want to watch it again so bad. It drives me insane every time I see somebody on Twitter that's like, oh man, I watched it again. And I'm like, that must be fantastic. I'm very happy that you get to do that. I hate you right now.
Aww.
Like it makes me so mad that we don't have access to it in the way that people with HBO Max have access to it.
Yeah.
I guess I could set up a VPN and I could borrow somebody's HBO Max login and do the whole thing, but seems like a lot of work. And I won't get to watch it like on my TV in 4K and whatever. Like if they put out, I just pre-ordered the Ghostbusters Ultimate Collection 4K Blu-ray set, which is Ghostbusters 1, Ghostbusters 2, and Afterlife, and then Making Ghostbusters, which is like a documentary. And then a bunch of other special features that comes in a cool box. And it omits 2016 because that's the right call. Sorry, Paul Feig, you made a bad movie. If they do a Matrix box set, like a 4K Blu-ray box set with all 4 movies, I'm probably gonna buy it. I'm probably gonna buy it because I want to have actual like physical hard copies of this, because I want to be able to watch this one in particular at the highest quality possible, which the highest quality that I can possibly watch it with my setup, because I don't have an OLED TV. So that would be better. If I had an OLED, that would be even better. But yeah, like I want to make sure that I don't get like frame rate drops or artifacting or any of the weird stuff that you get when you're streaming stuff, which most of the time I don't care. But in this instance, I'm like, no, this movie deserves to be in the highest fidelity possible.
Fair.
Because then on top of everything story-wise and character-wise and performance-wise, the visuals in this movie are, it's like, hey, you know all that stuff that we were like revolutionizing back
Oh,
then?
yeah.
And everybody else has like
Yeah.
taken that and like leaps forward with that technology. Now we get to play with it in our
And it
movie.
is spectacular.
And
It's spectacular. I don't know, being able to
yeah, when Bugs jumps off the building and like does that inverted kick thing and then down the sign,
Yeah.
it's
It's
so
pretty
good.
epic. I think even just being able to revisit the Machine City and the pods, like the cryo, what I don't know what they're called, but the like umbilical things that are weird and gross, with the technology that exists now is so cool. Because after
Yeah.
just watching the originals, right, where you're like, the technology is not quite there to make it like what our eyes are attuned to now, right? And so for being able to watch it and be like, oh, okay, this is like so integrated, like the city is awe-inspiring. Like Iode, when they like see the whole, I'm just like, this is such a great, beautiful utopia, like exactly what you're saying, and that you feel it in a way that, I don't know, everything about the visual effects, I think they really nailed this time. And being able to have the cool and the thing I love, they have science mumbo jumbo, but we don't spend too much time about it, right? What is this technology
Yeah.
that can humanize these programs that exist only in the Matrix?
Yeah.
A magnet something jargon. Cool.
I can download the schematic for you if you want. Yeah, I'd like that.
Like
It's so good.
Cool. Like, it's like, I don't know.
It doesn't
It
matter.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, it
But
doesn't
it
matter.
exists, and I buy it, and what a cool way to deal with the Morpheus storyline, I have to say. I really think that it worked so well. Like the thing, because the thing that I always thought was going to grate on me is the Jonathan Groff character, and then the Morpheus character, like what's it, Yaya, is that his, how you say his first name?
Yahya Abdul Mateen II.
And I was really worried. I was like, how are they going to do these two iconic characters? What are they going to do with them? And the way that they exactly, and I wouldn't have thought about it except for like what you're talking about, right? Like, how do you take like the best versions of who you always were, and just because you have a different outside form, it doesn't actually change who you are at its core. And so they were able to take the core of Smith and the core of Morpheus and serve this particular story, because both of them have different motives, right? Like, because everything about the Morpheus character came to fruition in this movie too, in terms of like the original Morpheus. The original Morpheus had one purpose. He was trying to find the one, he found the one, and he felt like that's all it was. Of course, it would have clouded the rest of his future, and he would have always been stuck on that, and it could have led to some not great things happening for him in the future. I believed everything in the sentence or two that Niobe was talking about. I saw all of Morpheus's life play out. Like, and that's all I needed, because it was so true to who he had established as a character. And then for this version of Morpheus, the code that Neo had made, right, that Thomas Anderson is putting into the system, that is his version of Morpheus and what he needs to be who he is. It's just so he does it. He's able to create the Morpheus that knows how to make him who he is. And I think that that's just such a cool thing. And it allows Morpheus to have a rebirth and be able to go on a different journey. And
well, and because this Morpheus has the soul and the spirit of Morpheus, but is a program, is a machine, now has this new perspective. He still has the same drive of like, it's my job to facilitate the awakening of the one. That's my deal, that's my purpose. But he's also a machine, which means that like his empathy for the machine world is a different thing than Morpheus, because Morpheus was very singular, and that's why Locke is a foil for him, right? Like that's why that character exists in that story, is like, oh, we've got Locke and Morpheus, who are they're not opposites, they're yin and yang. They circle one another, right? Like we need them both for balance. But what do they both want? They both want the destruction of the machines. But Neo went beyond that, right? That was the whole purpose of those first 3 stories, was that we got to a place where we get past this need for conflict between man and the machines, to a point where, like, hey, we both have to work together in order to stop Smith. He's the real threat, right? And it's like, that's why Smith is the character that he is in that, because you have to create a threat big enough to bring them both together on the same side, which allows for the world in the 4th movie of, like, now the machines and the humans can live together, and that's actually the path forward. Iode is the future, not the machine world or Zion. Both of those are flawed. Right. Machine City and Zion are both flawed, right? They both actually need to fall away to make room for this new thing, which is what, like, everybody had kind of always envisioned the end of Matrix Revolutions to mean, is like when they sort of have that conversation with the Oracle and the Architect of, you know, are you gonna, what about the people who choose to leave? And it's like, we'll let them go. It's like, I have your words, or what do you think I am, a human? That was that, like, to me, that's what that always meant, was like, oh, now we have a world where it's like, if you want to live in the Matrix, live in the Matrix. If you want out of the Matrix to go live in Zion, go live in Zion. But that was unsustainable because it was a ceasefire, not a peace, right? Yeah. But peace in this new one is the real peace that they needed to be fighting for, which was coexistence, right? Cooperation, collaboration, and both sides prospering because of the other, right? Yeah, like when we get that scene of them going through the garden, and they're like, we couldn't, humans never could have re-engineered the genetic sequence of a strawberry, but I can't remember the name of that one, but it's got like almost like a biblical name, that program, who's with like the French accent or whatever. And it's like they talk, but this guy can. And it's like, yeah, it's actually, you know, like it's pretty easy. We just do this. And it's like, but you need the human touch in order to bring it to life, right? Like, in order to breathe that life into it. So it's like, you can't have one without the other. You can't have this prosperity without both sides working together, which is such a beautiful message, especially right now. What we need so badly is more messages like this, of like, hey, if we just get past ourselves for 5 minutes and realize that we're all stronger together, and that different experiences and viewpoints aren't bad things, they're good things. We just have to learn to cooperate and collaborate, right? Yeah, like the movie just, oh god, it works on so many different levels, because we have barely even talked about Trinity and Neo, and like the core central love story of this, which is that, like, that idea of like I love how they also take the Architect and the Oracle, and they combine them into one character in Neil Patrick Harris's character in The Analyst. Who is like, he lays that out of like, oh, they were both like, they had this like tension between them, but I don't, and that's why Machine, you know, the head of the Machine, like, loves me, because you get the best of both worlds with me, which is he's so arrogant. It's so good. He's such a good villain in this.
He does a good job.
I love that was
he
his
does
role.
A good job, and you understand, like, again, they do enough world building that you understand what happened, right? Like, you understand where they are, and it is, you're able to reboot it. And the thing that's kind of interesting, because this is, I think, my biggest grievance from the 3rd film, is that the machines were nemesis without having personality, right? Like Neo ends up in the Machine City, and then sees that big face in the sky, and it hooks him in, and he defeats, right? But they weren't, I never got the conflict. I never understood the machines in, like, as a society, right? And like what they were, and them being, they were always just faceless, like, bad guys, like squids, right? They didn't mean anything. And so I think the being able to describe the way the analyst talks about what happened and talks about, or maybe it's Bugs actually, that talks about like the energy shortages. Maybe no, it might be the analyst. Because I feel like it's when they're where they're discussing,
I think they both
right, where
did.
they were
They
talking
both
about
did.
what they like, that they needed another Matrix and they needed to figure out what it was and it needed to work well, and that this one, the reason that the analyst has so much power is because they understood what happened the last time there wasn't enough like humans generating electricity or whatever, because these machines actually had agency, and you learn something, and it could have helped because there were machines that were actual named characters in this film, right? And so it allows you to like integrate it more, where you're realizing that they all want something. They're not just like these like faceless creatures that just need energy. And as much as that should have been enough to motivate me through the first 3 Matrix movies, it really wasn't, because they didn't mean anything real in terms of like their agency, because I think it always is much more powerful when you understand like the villain of any story is the hero of their own, right? And so when you understand what the machines wanted and why they want it and what Trinity and Neo do, it's, I don't know, I just think it was really well executed in the exposition that didn't wind up being too pedantic or trivial or mind numbing, right? It all I think helped serve the story and help give me a better grounding and understanding of what I should care about and how I should care about the things happening in this iteration. So I enjoyed it. The swarm thing was freaky. Like what a way to do zombies, but through science fiction, hey? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like we always talk about the different things that the Wachowskis are able to pick out in popular culture and make it grounded in science fiction. And I think that was a cool, I don't know, that was just a cool, because I hate it. You just can't get away from it. They're everywhere and they just, I don't know. I also loved that nobody died. Like, I know it's such a small thing, but their characters, all of the little, like the other characters, like, all of Bugs's crew, one of them, what is it? Brian J. Smith, I think is his name, is like a Stargate Universe guy that I really like. Like I recognized him, and like they're just like the crew, like Sequoia, I think is the name of the operator, was in it. Like you got to see, like that was such a cool thing. Like you see him as an avatar, sort of like in the Matrix, to make him present. And I just think that the way that they dealt with that integration was so great, but also that the crew gets to live. And I just think it's such a cool, because after all the everybody dying in the previous iteration.
Yeah. Well, and when like he calls it out, right? Because he like I at the end of the second act, like when we go into the action sequence in the second act, they go back into the Matrix, and it's like they're going through the place or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, we're all gonna die."
Yeah.
And you're like, and you're sitting there as in the audience going like, yeah, some of you guys aren't making it back, but I hope you do. Like you just said that, so I hope you do. And then you get into the third act and everything's happening. And it hits that certain point because Bugs is not in the Matrix because she can't be for them to do their plan or whatever. But they use that so perfectly as like, because she's not there, they can use her as a Deus Ex Machina to like get her plugged in there, and she can get everybody out. And so like you get to that certain point where you realize that she's going to jack in and go in to save everybody, and you're like, oh, the whole crew's coming home, you guys. Like what and you don't feel cheated in the least. It's just I don't. This is one of those things where like I need to watch it again. I need to watch it a couple more times to really like dig into that stuff and dissect like how did Lana Wachowski do that in a way that like, because it didn't feel like false stakes. It felt like they actually just overcame it.
Yeah.
Like it felt like it really felt like to me that like Bugs not being there, what it was like they were down their most valuable player.
Yeah.
And so when she enters back into the game, it's like, oh, cause she actually, I mean, like I said earlier that she was like the child of Neo and Trinity, like she's both of them, but she also has a little bit of that willfulness of Morpheus, right? Like
Yeah.
she's kind of, I guess
She's
she's
all
kind of
three
all
of them.
three of them.
Oh, she's the best of all three of them.
Yeah, because like it's her willpower of like, no, we're all going home. Like that's the thing that does. It's also her saying to Neo, like when he's gonna jump, and she's like I was there, like I saw it, I saw that moment, and I saw you, and I saw it freeze, like I saw it stop, and she's the one who has the will and the strength of conviction to convince him to take the next step. It's man, oh god, it's
And
so good. It's such a good
and the
movie,
thing
and I feel bad for people
I
who don't
but
like it because they're missing it.
exactly, and through talking about this, you know what I've realized about this is that it was a very much an ensemble film, because you're saying like like as
Mhm.
much as the the original trilogy was Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus, right? The films were all, this one really, you really do like, Bugs is such an important character, and it's just sad
Yeah.
because she's new to the world that you don't, but she's like the main thread of it all. But also the women in the positions of power, I'm also realizing, are such an interesting, awesome thing about this version. So as much as we don't have the Oracle really in the original trilogy, and I mean, I'm probably forgetting somebody, but it really was just Trinity and the Oracle, especially in the first one. I know that Niobe was in the second one, and like we had like Tank's family, but there weren't as many
Yeah,
awesome.
Link was in the second and third one, and
Yeah,
meant to
yeah,
be
like meant to be,
Tank or
yeah.
Dozer. I
And
can't
it
remember
was
which one,
okay,
but
like it was good. But
the one that
for
survived.
this, the thing
Yeah.
that's so solid is it it means a lot when I think that you can have like Niobe and Bugs in this sort of what Locke and Morpheus were in in the second and third ones, right? That you sort of get this
Mhm.
like who's somebody for the better of the other group, and but you need the heroes and all of that stuff. And I don't know, I just think it's kind of nice. It was a good use of those characters. So I just think the ensemble worked really well in that crew that they
Yeah.
used. So I don't know, I enjoyed all of them. And I mean, we haven't talked about her, but Christina Ricci was an unexpected cameo. I don't know if people knew that she was in this movie, but I also am
I didn't realize until just now, looking at
no.
IMDb, that Christina Ricci was in this. Which character did she
She's one of
play?
the people in the boardroom. And I said it out loud. I said it out loud to myself. I was like, "Oh my gosh, Christina Ricci." And my sister was like, "Stop talking." But like she's not super important. And I'm just kind of like, what an
I did not
unexpected.
clock her in
I mean,
this
cuz she looks kind of
at
different.
all.
I mean, she's blonde. I think she's blonde in
Yeah.
it. But it was very like, I was like, "Is that her? I think that's her." Because it wasn't an important role. It was just it was one of the like things keeping him in the loop or whatever. So I don't know.
Mhm.
I think that was interesting too. Like I don't know, all of the cyclical stuff that they were doing. I think was a really interesting. I don't know. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, that whole first act was there was a lot of commentary on
Yeah,
human, sort of like what, like where we're
yeah,
at right
yeah,
now as a
yeah.
people, and the
And
stuff that we did, like sort of the daily grind and being trapped and all of that sort of
well,
stuff. The way that you could, like, we could see the loop, but he couldn't.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
he was stuck in it, so he couldn't see the loop, but he could feel
yeah.
it. And it's like it was very relatable, I think, and it was meant to be, of like,
The thing
I
that
think that the message there is just sort of the like, hey, if like what are you doing this for,
yeah,
if not like to
yeah,
live?
yeah.
Like if this is your whole thing, because I do think that our generation is very career
Mhm.
focused. We were raised to be very career focused. Like if we're not changing the world on a daily basis, then we're
Yeah.
failures. Um, and so I think that that's something that we have in common with, like Gen X and millennials have that in common.
Yeah.
Um, especially like you and I, like we're cusp,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like we're right there in the middle. But like there is very much that attitude of like man, because hey, here's a really great example. You and I both very successful adults, right?
Nice.
Like by all metrics, we're very successful adults. We have good jobs, careers. We're like,
Enjoy our lives.
I yeah, like really, we really shouldn't have too much to complain about, and yet both of us, I think, have this like yearning in us of like, yeah, but like I'm not doing the most amazing thing. And it's like,
don't articulate this, Mike. It's hurting my soul because everything you just said is so accurate, and then when you put it in,
but does it? But I think that what Lana Wachowski is trying to get across with that is like, if that's what you're living for, like if that's your deal, then like, is that really it? Because it's kind of just a mouse wheel, right? It's like a hamster wheel that you're on. So like there has to be more to it, and that's the thing. Like that's what's missing for Thomas Anderson, is that like that other half of him is which is like the analyst talks about it. That's exactly how he built it.
Yeah,
is that like she's there, she's in his orbit, but always out of reach until he breaks the cycle, until he breaks until really Bugs breaks the loop, right, and busts him out of that. And as she does, it reawakens Agent Smith, and Agent Smith becomes a chaotic element that the analyst can't deal with. So it's like those things have to work together.
Yeah,
it's so good that like in order for Neo to come back, Agent Smith has to also be there. And by the end of it, it's like, are they antagonists? I don't know that I don't know that Smith is his enemy, even though like maybe Smith tries to kill him a little bit
at the end.
But
and
it's
it was
like
a question I couldn't answer. She's like, so why did Smith join his side? And I was like, well, I think they kind of want the same thing, but I also was like, I actually don't know if they're like, it was a little bit, but it's like epic storytelling, right, where you always have to have the two halves of the, and so it's like you always have the arch enemy and the love interest, right? And I think that they hit that trope really well with.
And I think like the thing with Smith in this incarnation is that you can't fault a tiger for its stripes. It's like that's its nature, right? You can't be like, hey tiger, stop having stripes. Stop wanting to hunt and eat things. It's like, no, that's the tiger, right? And in order for Neo to exist, we have to have Smith. In order for him to be the one, Smith has to exist. And I'm very interested if this continues, if this isn't a period on the story, if this is an ellipsis, then I'm very interested to see what they do with that Smith character moving forward, because he does not want to be the antagonist. You kind of get that sense from him of like I don't want to fight you. I have to fight you. Like, we have to do this. This is part of it. I have to destroy you. It's why I exist. It's like you exist, therefore I exist, therefore I have to make you not exist. Right? Like it's like a compulsion. But it's like, but I don't know. I think that like there's maybe there's a redemption story for Agent Smith in a sequel. And him becoming, integrated into the system a little bit better. Maybe what he needs is somebody else to balance him. And oh my god, if Trinity just became awoken as the one, then there is another there has to be another one for her.
Yeah, I like it. I'm here for it.
Her counterpart has to exist as well.
Let's make it happen.
And what if that's the key
that they needed to, and then they can, and that they're the keys to the machines and the humans living in harmony, because Smith is the most sort of human machine because he's got the like connection with Neo, and I don't know.
And if Smith can experience love,
then
remember what Smith's thing is. Neo is the one, and Smith is the multitude, right? He's his ability is to infect. If he can experience love and then he can infect the machine world with that, That's the like
go.
that maybe that's the key. Maybe that's where it goes. And then on top of that, I want to see Iode like as like I want to see them heal the world. Like that's what has to happen now is that like if there are 2 more movies, like if it's another trilogy, by the end of the 3rd one, you know, like in Revolutions, we get that moment where they shoot up above the clouds for a second.
Right, yeah.
And they
Yeah,
see the real
Yeah.
sky. And they set this up in Resurrections of they created the fake sky and it's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Like it's amazing. Like it's a work of art in and of itself, and they've created like an atmosphere. Like they've got clouds and weather and stuff like that, and it's so cool. But like imagine a moment where like that shatters and reveals like the actual sky.
Ooh.
Right? Like where that's like broken away because they've actually figured out a way, like because working together the machines and the humans can actually restore the world, right? And now this situation of like now they have their solar energy back, they don't have to use humans, and we break that cycle.
Ooh,
right? Like
yeah.
you finally get out of that, and the Matrix can still exist and people can still live in the Matrix if they want to live in the Matrix, and that's the service that the machines can provide to the humans while the humans do things for the machine, right?
Yeah.
Like it, yeah, that's, I would love to see that, and I would love to see like a world where like, and that like the end of, if you were gonna really finish it, like the way that Star Wars was like the Rise of Skywalker is the end of the Skywalker saga, and then it ended, and you're like, this was just Return of the Jedi again, and nothing is resolved. Like,
yeah,
there's still the First Order out there. Like they're not, it's not done. The war's not over, you guys. But instead, if they were to like do that, get us to that point, and then jump forward like 100 years or something like that, like be like, here, like it's been 500 years or something, and to show that like life has come back to the world, and that working with the machines, humans were able to like basically repopulate the planet with uh you know, animals and stuff like that, but also you would see like machine animals and that sort of thing of like that serve different purposes, and just have like the world in like perfect equilibrium, like just this perfect balance of the two things together. That's what I like. Now that we're here with the Matrix, that was always what I wanted to see. That was like that sort of like them working together and then prospering, and the world being restored was definitely what I wanted before. But now that we have the Matrix Resurrections, and we've seen Iode, and we've seen the machines, like these other characters like Sabebe and whatnot, working with the humans, it's like it's an inevitability.
Yeah.
Like now that's what has to happen in order to put the period on the sentence, in order for it to be a complete story. It has to get to the point where that happens. I don't know that they will do that, because if this movie, I didn't look at the box office.
I don't think it's doing very well.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? Like, how can it when No Way Home absolutely obliterated the box office? But and then Omicron surged, and now everything shut down again, and the world is going back into pandemic measures and whatnot. But I don't know. I think that HBO Max also has to be considered in that, and you have to like look at how many people streamed it, and you know, like what was the actual reach of this product, right? As opposed to just box office numbers. But if Warner Brothers deems it successful enough to continue the story, I don't know that more movies is the best way to do it. I think that they should do like a long form
miniseries
storytelling.
Yeah.
HBO Max series, like give us like 3 or 4 seasons of something, and get us there. It would be cool to like have a little bit more of Trinity and Neo, in like the immediate aftermath of this, and talk about what we just talked about of like if there's if Trinity is also the one, then there's a new Smith out there somewhere. But then to tell that story and then put a button on that in a season, and then like
keep going,
and then let's jump forward 100 years.
Ooh,
right? And maybe Trinity and Neo are still there. right? Because we've kind of explained that they can be immortal in a way, right? Like that especially like if the technology keeps getting better, then they can keep sustaining them for longer and longer. And how cool would it be if eventually their bodies didn't exist anymore and they existed only in the Matrix and they were essentially programs,
Weird.
right? Yeah, like have them like almost completely transition into being digital beings.
That's an interesting way to end, right? Like that they transition into being fully
Yeah.
digital, and the machines become a little bit more human, right? And that's the evolution of is
Yeah.
that it's like it's not ever about AI becoming human. It's about a little bit of both, right? Like how do you can't just separate it when you get to a certain
Yeah.
point. You have to figure out how to integrate it and live in harmony.
But that way you get to keep Keanu and Carrie Ann Moss in the franchise,
Yeah.
right? And every season, like do 3 or 4 seasons, and every season like you jump forward 100 years. You have a whole new cast except for like these core characters of Neo, Trinity, Agent Smith, right? That get to the ones that are programs that are machines, they get to be there perpetually. But
It's an
yeah,
it's an
like
interesting thing that you're talking about, like with the future, because it was something that I was thinking about this when the movie was first coming out. People were saying like, "Oh, like yeah, how do you make a movie about like living in 1999? That would have been so cool." And it's there. Well, there was so much technology, and it imagined this sort of future beyond the future that obviously we're now in 20 years later. 20 years later, oh my goodness, 20 years later. um you can still see the subtlety in how we imagine technology evolving. And I will just to sort of cap it in the same way that you have. I think that like this is like my sort of end thoughts, and the wish for the future or whatever is actually more of a looking back. In the 1999 version of the Matrix, everything sort of ended terribly for the main characters, right? And the world that like the ultimate thing that was the epic ending to that was a ceasefire, right? That there was this war that had been raging for years, and there's no way to undo that. So instead they just want to live, they just want to be who they are. But what the future technology allowed them to do, like over the 60 years since that time, right, with different leadership and with women who were forward thinking and were thinking about how to utilize the technology and not create a binary, not say us and them, but us with them. What can we do and how can we evolve? I think that speaks to the core difference between like the last 20 years, like how we view technology, how we view society, how we view all of these things. And I think that that's a beautiful sort of evolution, because the pieces of the science fiction all still remain intact, but they're plussed in ways that in the 20 years, right? How did we imagine this intense futuristic technology? Well, it went leaps and bounds in subtly holistic ways, right? Like they're able to personify machines because that's something that we now think of as really tactile, right? Like back when the Matrix came out, they weren't. There was in no way. This is the thing I think that we were missing, right? Is that they really wanted to villainize the machines because that's how we had to think. It had to be a binary, and that's, I think, at that time, and I mean especially going right into like 1999, before the like September 11th and all of that stuff, right? That the world became very binary. I think us and them was a huge part of the early 2000s. All across, like all around the world, there was really divisive things. And I think that now, especially, you were talking about Gen X, right? Like millennials and Gen X is living in a world that, yes, there's this grind and there's this capitalism that we are all part of, but we also all want to make the world a better place. I feel like every generation wants to make the world a better place, but I think it's permeated in technology in a way that it hadn't been able to previously. And I think that really comes out in this movie as well. I feel like I'm going on a cyclical rant, but I hope that you can see what I'm talking, like just in terms of like the beauty of the potential of what you're talking about the future of these films, and like what does the Matrix, what does a new trilogy of the Matrix look like? And I think it doesn't end in death, right? It's not, the whole crew of the Nebuchadnezzar doesn't die in the first movie. The whole crew gets to live because we know that we can that we can save each other, and that we can all get through it together, and that if we just think differently about how we utilize technology, and about how we work as a team, and about how we work within the structures and the confines of the world that has been given to us, that we can come out of it the other side. And I think the worse that the world gets, the more hopeful it has to get at the same time. Because I feel like in 20 years, the world could have got a lot darker. But I think that this movie reflects to us that it actually hasn't. Oh, that's really beautiful, Mike. I don't know if you got that as well, but that's what I'm now deciding to take away from this, is that 20 years ago, the world was a lot darker for a lot of different people, especially people like the Wachowskis. And I think that now that we have this community and this connection that spans the globe, and that we can hear one another and we can see one another, and as much as there's still conflict, we can see a way through together. I think that that's absolutely beautiful. And hopeful. So
I think so. And to sort of bring it all back to the conversation that we were having at the beginning of the podcast, and everything kind of being a bit of a bummer, and certainly a lot of what we talk about in the post show, which Patreon supporters will get to listen to. I at the end of the day, it's like, there's a lot of systemic stuff that we're dealing with right now that I think, especially because like that those rocks have been turned over. When I talked about this a while ago, when we started our Matrix rewatch, that like 1999, as you just said, it's like, we're 2 years before 2001, and we kind of look at that as like this idealized point in time. And the further away we get from it, the more I think that we'll look at the 90s as like in the same way that we ever look at any golden era, right? Any golden age of a society. It's like we look back at it and it's like, actually, like a lot of people had it pretty good, and like conflict was not as bad as it has been or would be. Like things are kind of in a nice state for a minute there. But the big thing about the 90s that allows you to have that belief is, I mean, like if you're a white person, it's very easy to see it that way. If you're a straight person, it's very easy to see it that way. If you're cisgendered, it's very easy to see it that way. If you're in the Western world, it's very easy to see the 90s that way. But the other people in other parts of the world, or with other identifiers and different experiences, might not see 1990 to 99 in the same light,
it might have been a catalyst towards some of the worst stuff that ever happened in the world. Right? Like,
and I think that like 2001 sort of rocking everybody's world and upsetting the status quo led way to the 2010s, and then now in the 2020s. Like, I think the 2010s were kind of a bit of a time of upheaval of like of everybody realizing just how bad things have gotten for a lot of people, and then fighting to change that stuff. And then I think like the last couple of years, the last 4 years, let's say, I mean 5 now, but really like since Trump took office, was a lot of the old guard. I really hope, and the optimist in me sees it this way, that was and we're still in the middle of it, so it's hard not to see it as a bad thing and not be pessimistic about it, because we are in the middle of it. Hopefully when we're on the other side of it, we will see it as like that status quo. It's like their last breath, sort of like that last fit before it dies, and gives way to a new order, and that new order being more progressive and more inclusive, and that sort of one step closer to an idealized state, that progress, right? and looking at the world now and saying like exactly what you're saying, like you know, it's a lot worse in a lot of ways, and we're going through a real bad time right now because of the pandemic, because of extreme right wing conservatism, because of a bunch of different things and these systemic things. But one of the reasons why I think we have such a pessimistic outlook on it now is because we see it for what it is, right? And the like I said, like that rock got turned over, and we see all the disgusting things underneath it scattering. But now that the rock has been turned over, we can actually do the work and get the job done, and make the world a better place, which is what happens every time, you know, society goes through a change like this. So, you know, we see it civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, going through that era. You see it you know, back when democracy was a crazy idea, you know, and wars were fought over independence, and you know, getting rid of crazy ideas like monarchs and stuff like that. Where it's like you kind of have to go through this period of conflict before you can make it to the other side, and establish those new orders and change the status quo. So, you know, like I said, it's hard to see it because we're right in the middle of it. But I do think that a story like this one, and I do think that like we're actually seeing quite a bit more of this sort of stuff right now. Um, Look at Spider-Man: No Way Home. Not to get into any spoilers, but all of the other Spider-Man movies were about the bad guy dying at
Yeah.
the end. And Tom Holland's Spider-Man is a different
Yeah.
Spider-Man, right? And like you know, uh, at the end of Homecoming, he saves the Vulture. He saves Adrian Toomes from
Yeah.
dying, right? And then that's repaid to him when he's in jail, right? Then he keeps Peter's secret, and then it plays even better and more tragic in Far From Home when Mysterio dies, because it's like oh, like he couldn't do it, but Mysterio killed himself, right?
Mhm.
Like it's
Yeah.
he sort of did it to himself, his own anger and greed, avarice, all that stuff. But then No Way Home being about like what if we could save them, right? um you know, I think that we're in that place now where it's like these are the stories that we want. We don't want Rogue One where everybody dies at
Yeah.
the end,
Yeah.
right? like and to me, like, I understand it, I get it, like I understand why Rogue One is the movie that it is, but that's why it will never quite work for me, because it's like, because that's not what I want from Star Wars, that's for sure. And I'm hoping that they've learned that lesson, and that this new stuff that's coming out is gonna be different, Mandalorian and Boba Fett and whatnot. If you haven't have you watched the first episode of Boba
Not
Fett
yet,
yet?
no. But I did finish the last 2 episodes
Oh
of
my
Hawkeye.
goodness.
So slowly but surely.
Yeah,
Slowly but surely.
yeah. Hawkeye's another good example though of it's like you know, like we it's a bittersweet ending, but it is a happy ending for our characters, and you know, it's not like it gets to a place of not being cynical,
Right, right.
right? Hawkeye starts that story as very cynical and comes through it by the end. Kate transforms him,
Mhm.
right? Like that's the whole purpose of that story, and that character interaction and them being partners, is a, you know, new Hawkeye for a new era.
And I think Gen X
And
is gonna save the world, so here's hoping. Put all my stock in that.
I yeah, I think this is what we need from our art right now. We need more stuff like this, but I think that it's also going to be met in the way that the Matrix Resurrections has been met by the majority of the media, which is with cynicism, because critics are by nature critical and
And
therefore
cynical.
cynical.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like it comes with the territory, because if you do anything for long enough, it's like the old saying, was like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, and then the much more modern realization of like, do what you love and you'll
always be
basically like destroy the thing that you love by, you know.
Yeah.
Because like we have a perfect example of it. We loved Smallville. It was the greatest thing. As bad as that show ever got, you and I had this shared thing that brought us joy, and then we decided to do a podcast. We made it into work and just sucked the joy out of all of that stuff, and now I can't watch any of those CW shows except for Superman and Lois. But like all that other stuff, it's like it's just they did the crossover and Kat McNamara was in it, and it's like, oh cool, maybe that's a thing that I should care about. No, I don't. And it, like we talked about before, I have such relief in the fact that I don't have to care about that stuff, because we just broke it for ourselves. But so I think that critics, when it's your job to watch movies and then speak about them critically, it's really easy for criticism to become purely negative and for that cynicism to creep in there. But anyways, I'm actively fighting against that personally. Like that's what I'm trying to do.
There you go.
Like just for me and the way that I talk about stuff. But anyways, we talk about this forever. I think we're done. But I think we did it.
I think we've
talked
done
about
a lot
Matrix.
of podcasting. This is a big podcast.
Lots of stuff.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Awesome. It's the clock on the recording is 2 hours and 42 minutes. We're done. Thank you guys.
And not a lot of that is filler. Like we chatted. We chatted for a long time.
No, yeah. Yeah.
Podcast.
Yeah. Well, and we went right into the post show, and then there was no like in between.
Yeah.
Anything. Yeah. We just went right into this. So thank you guys for listening. Happy New Year to everybody, I suppose. I always feel like it's an arbitrary day. We just went, this is the one. But in any case, whatever that means to you, Happy New Year. You know, if you celebrate the Lunar New Year, then I'm not saying Happy New Year to you. I'll say Happy New Year to you in like a month. Jeez, man. But I hope everybody is handling this latest wave of the pandemic well and getting through it and staying safe and all that sort of thing. But I guess we'll be back next week. Talk about Hawkeye. That is the plan. And then after that, I don't know. I don't know what we're gonna do. I guess we'll just see where the mood takes us in 2 weeks.
That's true.
It's gonna be one of those episodes. Sorry in advance. Although it might end up being us rating Hawkeyes again. You know,
those are always a good way to start the new year.
Remains one of my favorite episodes. Cool. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Stay safe, everybody. Wash your hands and be kind to one another. I'm going to change it to listen to science once we no longer have to wash our hands. So 5 years from now.
You washing your hands is just always
you
good
should
advice,
just always
though.
wash your hands.
That's not
That's
that
fair.
doesn't
That's
yeah
fair.
Just always wash your hands more frequently. Follow the Thunderquack Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by searching the Thunderquack Podcast. You can support us in 3 ways. First, by heading to the podcast service of your choice and leaving a rating and review. Second, by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merch from your favorite podcasts. And last but not least, by heading to patreon.com/thunderquack to kick in with your monthly pledge of support and get cool rewards like early access and extended episodes. The Thunderquack Podcast is the official podcast of thunderquack.com. Head to thunderquack.com to discover more great podcasts.